and welcome to CSL Denver, a place, a space, and a face of love. A spiritual community teaching ancient wisdom and using universal principles to empower our lives and the lives of others. Now, today, we continue our series on community. And just to give you an idea of what community really is, we're experiencing it here today because our technical support team is having some issues. And so someone else in the community has to pick up where they are not able to. And so when we look at the theme for today, the sacred symphony of community, this is a perfect example of what life is about. As Ray said in the song, all manner of things may happen. You're not what happened. You're not what you said, but we are the light of the world that when we come together, we can show that all things are possible. And with the community, however many you have in the community, is twice that many lights shining. And so today, when we look at the symphony of the sacred community, I want to ask the question, how many of you, whether you're in the audience here or whether you're online, have ever attended a symphony or listened to a symphony, right? So maybe it was Beethoven's Fifth, right? Dun-dun-dun-dun, that gets you started. Or maybe it was the Rhapsody in Blue. And if any of you ever caught the United Airlines or heard the United Airlines, that music that first comes on with the clarinet, that little sultry clarinet, that's a Rhapsody in Blue. Or maybe you heard Duke Ellington's Symphony in Black. But whichever one you listened to, there was this moment where it captured you, where it made you pay attention, whether you like the music or not, because the way the symphony is done, it's done with 4 sets of instruments, right? It's done with strings, percussions, woodwinds, and brass. That's how a symphony is composed. And so the one thing that stands out when you see a symphony more so than hear it, but when you see it, the thing that sticks out the most is the unity of that group, the oneness of that group, and how they work together. How they work together. Now, the other thing that some of you may or may not know, that a symphony is made up of 4 parts. It starts out fast, and there's a slow piece, then there's a dance piece, and there's another ending piece, and they can sometimes move them around, but that's normally the pattern that it takes. And so when you look at the 4 parts and you look at the instruments that are there, there's always a conductor as well. Someone who is orchestrating the whole piece. Now, anyone can be the orchestra leader, the conductor, at any given time. The conductor is not necessarily the one that's in front with the baton. Because if you know music, and if you played music, in each section, they have what? They have the first chair, and they have the second chair. And that first and second chair are the conductors of that section. Now, when I was in the band, I played clarinet, and I also badly wanted to play saxophone. And my teacher would not let me switch. We took some kind of crazy test, and he said, "Oh, you're going to be a great clarinetist." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I don't want to play it." But I was able to get to the second chair. And so my job as the assistant to the conductor of that section was to pay attention, was to listen, was to look for other people's gifts and figure out if someone someday would take the second chair or the first chair or would lead a solo. Because that's what community is about. One thing we know now, after we've gone through the pandemic, is the magic word that everybody's heard: succession planning. There must always be a succession plan. And so when you look at a symphony, when you look at an orchestra, when you look at the sacred community, everybody should be able and willing to step up to be the second chair, the first chair, the conductor. And so when we can create that kind of environment, we are well on our way to creating the sacred community. Well on our way to creating the sacred community. Now, when the musicians are in the position, you know, the conductor, everybody's in a relaxed position, and the conductor, if you've seen it, taps the baton and raises his arm. Before then, everybody is like kind of relaxed, and at that moment, everybody's at attention. Their horns are in place. They're sitting up straight in the chair. And that's what we do in a community. When there is a cause or an issue or a person that needs to be serviced or celebrated or uplifted, that's what the sacred community does. It is the upliftment of everybody. It is an upliftment of everybody. And so when we look at building the beloved community, the sacred community, we must all look and see not only what our skills are, but where we fit in and what part do we have to play, and to always be ready, willing, and able to step up and grab the baton. And so under examination, and when we look at the community that joins together with various parts and various instruments, the thing that's being done is telling a story. A story is being told through the music, or a picture is being painted in your mind to give you an idea of life itself, And thus, in the great symphony of life, the sacred symphony of community, we look at each role as being important. There is no unimportant role in the symphony, because if you have a conductor with no music or no musicians, it might look interesting for a minute to see a person, but it's going to look pretty odd pretty soon. Or if you got percussions with no other music, it's going to sound like just random noise. But it is that coming together as one in unity that allows us to emerge as a sacred community, and giving each one of us our part to play. Now, it has been said that when a sacred community, or for that matter, any community of people, come together to express the divine, to express God's will, to express God's glory, there are no obstacles that stand in the way. There are no obstacles that stand in the way. And so when we begin to look at how we at CSL Denver, a smaller community, within a bigger community of Denver, within a bigger community of Colorado, when we begin to look at how we can make a difference, how we can change the world, we must remember the first and foremost, we got to show up. You got to show up. You can be the best conductor, the best percussionist, the best string person, but if you don't show up, there is no need for a community. There's no symphony. It's not there. You have to show up. There's a little tongue-in-cheek story by Hafiz, a Sufi, and he said he was in this town, and they were preparing right now, like Christmas. They were preparing for the Christmas play, Christmas program, and everybody was rushing around, getting their stuff going together, and they rushed over to the hall, and they were going to practice. And Hafiz was just sitting there on the bench in front of the church, just looking at everybody go in and smiling. And they said, Hafiz, aren't you going to be a part of the play? Aren't you coming to practice? And he says, well, I don't need to practice. I already know my part. Because he's saying that I have practiced before you tell me it's time to practice. The saying goes, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So his point was, I'm always practicing my part in the symphony. I'm always practicing my part in the community. So when you call on me, there is no need to practice. It's time to play at that point. And so that's what we have to do when we begin to build communities, whether it's the family or otherwise. We have to stay in practice. And when we look at the spiritual community that we're in and spiritual community in general, one of the hallmarks, the cornerstones of spirituality is spiritual practice. I don't want to wait till I'm in a crisis to try to figure out how to pray. I don't want to wait till I'm in a moment where my mind is just clouded with stuff to go try and meditate. I have to practice. And I want to dismantle that old saying that practice makes perfect. That's absolutely not. Practice makes improvement. Practice makes improvement, not perfection, because there's only one perfect thing in the universe, and that is God itself. So we can get real close, but we're still practicing to get closer to the mark of the divine that's within. And so when we take this idea and we look at any part of the universe, whether it's the ocean, whether it's the forest, whether it's the sky, the changing seasons, we see this rhythmic relationship between the various parts of each one of those communities, if you will, working together. And I like to bring up this slide from our global vision that says, we demonstrate the oneness of spirit in everything we do, knowing that the oneness is inclusive of race, age, ethnicity, culture, history, religion, political affiliation, experience, gender, and sexual orientation. Now that's a mouthful. Of the divine, and keep in mind that everything is included. That's how we demonstrate the oneness of God. That's how we demonstrate the oneness of spirit. And so let us continue to do that. Let us continue to look at how we can build a bond, build a bridge to create the sacred community. But this doesn't happen unless we have two things. Three things, really. One, we've already talked about, practice. You got to practice. Whatever your skill is, you got to practice. And if we look at this succession plan, you not only practice your part, but you practice somebody else's part, right? Because we know the symphony has different parts. So we may need to step in, like today, with the technology, we had to step in and do some stuff to get that piece together so that we can produce this show. All right? And the next thing is, and probably the most important thing, is your commitment. How committed are you to being in the symphony? How committed are you to practicing and to learning your part and learning others' part? And then last but not least of that, the willingness. Are you willing? You can have all the practice and be committed to your practice, but are you willing to be a part of the community? Are you willing to fit in? Are you willing to have dialogue? Are you willing to be able to look at things that say, yes, life is good. Yes, there are problems, but we as a community can work through them. And so when we are understanding what that looks like, we come up with this idea of this slide by Jim Lockhart in the Creating the Beloved Community. Safe space in spiritual community is not about eliminating discomfort. It is providing a supportive place where we can experience the inevitable discomfort of deep personal introspection and spiritual growth and support with support and understanding. In a true community, that is a place where we have a chance to make mistakes and be corrected before we go out into the broader world and everyone takes us for targets and they start shooting at every little thing we say wrong. But when you're in your sacred community, that's the place to have the mistakes, to have the problems, to work the things out so that it becomes a place where you will be lovingly corrected, not horrifically torn down. That's what a sacred community does. It allows you to grow into the fullness of who you are. It allows you to grow into the fullness of who you are. And so ultimately, what we get to when we look at this symphony of the community, this sacred symphony, there's three parts that get played out. And we want to use these to go into the points today to figure out how we continue to elevate community, one, and to engross ourselves with that. Now, in any community of an orchestra or a symphony, or however you define your community, there are three things that go on. There's a call and response. If you know music and you listen to music in a symphonic band, there's a call, there's a little tweety tweet over here. I'm not going to try to make that sound of a clarinet, and it may be responded by a tooty toot of a horn over here. So you have these two call and response. One thing calls, the other responds. So that's life. Life is this way of calling and responding, a symphony that we have to pay attention. Call and response. And then the next thing is a dialogue. There's always a dialogue going on, whether it's between the conductor and the musicians, or whether it's between the brass and the woodwinds, or the strings and the percussion, but there's always a dialogue going on, which is what makes the sacred community. We have to have communication. One of the things that came out during the pandemic was this idea of courageous conversations. Courageous conversations where people could get together from different walks of life and be able to talk freely about any subject without fear of reprisal, without being judged as best you can. We know judgment is a tough thing to deal with, but that's why we have sacred community, because somebody in the community gonna call you out and say, "Ooh, sound pretty judgmental there, my brother. You want to rephrase that? Can we say that in another way so it's not so incriminating or demeaning, or makes me more responsive to answer?" So there's a dialogue, and we have to understand what that means when we have these sacred conversations, when we're building community. And then the third thing is, when I make my statement during my dialogue, somebody may say, can you elaborate on that? Can you give, it sounds nice, but I need to know if there's more behind it. Can you elaborate on what you're saying? And so when we look at a symphony, these are the things that are going on. When we look at a community, this is what's going on. There's a call and response. There's a dialogue going on. And there's points where we have an elaboration, i.e., we get a solo player to step up and do a solo. And not like I used to play sometime when I wasn't confident. I played so low you couldn't hear me. I was truly solo. We don't need those kind of solos in the community. We need you to stand up, play loud, and even if you hit a wrong note, just keep playing. This is a forgiving place, right? And so when we look at trying to create a community in this way, where it's different parts and different movements and different levels of conversation to create a sacred space for people to grow, there are three things that I want you to leave home with. Number one is tuning. Number one is tuning. You have to, if you get to the orchestra early, before they start, you'll hear it sounds like just chaos. Everybody's strumming their instrument and blowing their horns and trying to find the tune that they're going to play. And everything in the universe is connected beyond appearances, right? So when you first appearances, that tuning thing is like, what is going on? Did I waste my money? Can I get out early? But when they get the instruments tuned and the conductor strikes the band up, there's perfect harmony. There's perfect harmony. And so when we look at this idea of tuning must come first. Every recital begins with a careful tightening of the pegs on the crossbar, twisting them in their sockets and the red threads as each string is plucked and tested. And so that's what when we engage in life, when we engage with different encounters with people, places, and things, we're trying to tune ourselves in to the flow of life so that we fit in, that we know when to play our parts. We know when to go high and we know when to go low. So this idea of being in tune, and that's the first thing that we have to do, is synonymous with us finding out who we are. What is our authentic self? I need to be tuned to me. Because if I start trying to tune to the saxophone and I'm the piano, or I'm trying to tune to the cello, it's not going to work. I need to be in tune with me so I can play my part. So that's the first thing. The first thing is we need to find our own tuning, our authentic selves, to be a part of the sacred community. Now, the second thing, and some people this might be hard. It's called timing or time. And if you ever been to a comedy show, the first thing they'll tell you if you go to an improv or something, they say in comedy, timing is everything. And I would say it's not just about comedy, it's about life. In life, timing is everything. And so if you can't get the timing right, you're always going to be one step ahead or one step behind. And if you've ever seen that in action, it's sad, but it's quite comical at the same time to watch somebody dance to a beat, and they're like, the beat's over here, and they're dancing over here, and it's like, what is going on? So timing is key. And I would submit that the essential ingredient in all things, whether it's cooking, when to add the sugar, or when to put the milk and stir it, or whether it's sports, when to pass the ball for the person to shoot the goal. And I know today we got the World Cup. I don't know who's winning, but I know there's some timing going on when they're passing that ball, trying to score to win the World Cup. There's a timing there. And ultimately, in life, there's a timing. Reverend T.D. Jakes says this: timing is so important. If you are going to be successful in music or dance or anything, you must be able to respond to rhythm and timing. It's the same in the spirit. People who don't understand God's timing can become spiritually sporadic, trying to make the right things happen at the wrong time. How many of us have done that? How many of us have tried to make things happen as opposed to letting them happen? Now, I may recall one time where I tried to make it happen, and it actually worked. And it had nothing to do with my making. I was serendipitously in tune with the divine. I had the right time, and I thought I was doing something, but it had nothing to do with me. My timing was in time with God. My tuning was in time. And so it happened. But when we are not timed to the sequence of what's going on, then we have a problem. And as we know, with music has this other thing called time signature for any of the musicians in the audience. The music could be set in a 4/4 time, or it could be a 3/4 time, right? Or it could be a cut time, or it could be allegro. So you got all these musical terms to determine when you speed up or when you slow down, or how fast or how slow the music's played. So timing is key. And last but not least, this is the ultimate of the community, and that's the harmony. It's the harmony. So once we have the tuning and the timing and everybody's doing their thing, the harmony is almost it's almost self-generated. It creates itself for us to be in harmony with one another. to be in harmony with one another. Now, I found I'm going to try to pronounce his name correctly. I did it 1,000 times online, but I'm going to forget it here now. So I'm not even going to try because I don't want to mess it up. But this was this gentleman was born in 1861. Rabindranath Tagore. He said this: the highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. To make our life harmonize with all existence. And what that's saying to me is, yeah, we know you got to understand the timing and you got to practice. But if it's just for practice sake, if it's not leading to this harmony of life, then it's kind of self-serving. And it doesn't support the community to reach its potential. Marcus Aurelius said this: he who lives in harmony with themselves lives in harmony with the universe. So one of the touchstones of this harmonic, symphonic community, if you will, is being in touch with yourself. Doing some exploration in your own laboratory of your life, trying to figure out who and what you are. And so when that happens, when we're able to allow ourselves to find our time to practice and then understand the timing of the piece, the music, the community, the harmony is a byproduct that God just gives us as a grace. And so as we move into this week and looking for ways that we can enhance our involvement, our call to action is two things. What is your role in the community? In the symphony of life, in the symphony of community, what is your role? I can't tell you. You have to define that for yourself, because you may be hiding your gift from me, or I may be hiding my gift from you. Each individual has to understand what their role is, what their part is in the symphony. And next is, how can you better share that gift with the community? How can you better make everything work in this harmonious way? And so when we're able to do that, when we can answer these questions and then take that same pattern of tuning ourselves to that, finding the timing to present that, the harmony of everything will fall in line. And so as we close and we look at the affirmation for this week, it's a simple one. I am one with the symphony of life. I am one with the symphony of life. And so when we can call on that, when we can be a part of that symphony of life, knowing who and what we are, knowing our time and having had the practice, we can be gracious and grateful members of the symphony of life, which is also known as the sacred community. Let us pray. Dear Mother, Father God, that harmony of life, that part where everything comes together in complete surrender, knowing that each part has its own unique gifts and talents to play, and that they do it freely, that they give openly, knowing that my prayer is your prayer too. And so no matter what the activity is, no matter what the words are, no matter what the situations are, we are all working together for a common good. And so as we look at God's grand symphony of life, and how when you wake up in the morning and you catch that dawn moment when all the birds are singing, and you look out the window and all of the animals are up and moving about, getting ready for their day, there was a beauty there. There is a simplicity there that allows us to awaken to that same simplicity and beauty within ourselves, that we can bring to our community, that we can bring to our family, that we can bring to the world, so that we begin to create a symphony of life. And so I know right here, right now, that each and every one of us that is in this room and that is online are awakening to the idea to tune in to our talents, to tune into our gifts, to awaken to the timing that God has set within each and every one of us to bring forth the sweet music and harmony that we all seek. And so as we continue to do that and we continue to allow ourselves to be vessels of the divine, to be an instrument, as they say, in the master's hand to make beautiful music, we do so lovingly and freely. And so I give thanks for this opportunity.